get going. Cool. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first Cloud Native Nordics Stories session. This is a casual, well, kind of panel feeling in online format, where we're gonna interview Kasper, Hans, Laszlo, and Jessica. First things first, we had technical difficulties in doing this. Now it's the first time we tried it. We were planning to do this on YouTube. Basically have the Zoom call here for us, 5, and then live stream it to YouTube. However, we got blocked because of some terms and conditions. Whatever, we don't really know. Anyways, we're thankful that you had this very fast turnaround time in 10 minutes or so when we kind of discovered it. So yeah, all good. And the format is going to be, we start with some short introductions, intros, and talk a bit about what we're going to talk about. And then each presenter or panelist gets something, 10, 15 minutes to talk about like what Cloud Native means for them and or relevant experiences or other thoughts about the ecosystem at this point. So yeah, and if you have questions, please write them in the Zoom chat, or I will also try to monitor the #stories channel in the Cloud Native Nordics Slack. So please don't unmute yourself or use video because, well, it's easier to see who's speaking then, and also we can get one way of communication. So when I see your questions in either the Zoom chat or in the Slack channel, I will bring them up at some suitable time, not to interrupt the speaker. Cool. Anything else to add from the panelists about the structure?
I think that that we're trying something out, and feedback is always welcome, either in Twitter or in Slack or wherever after the event as well. Please let us know what you thought.
Yes. Again, we're kind of doing this to combat the how to say quarantine times of the situation in Europe at the moment, and we're trying these things out. We had been thinking about doing live events before, but now we're forced to actually take them into action, and we're going to explore different venues of doing these things. The other initiative that we kicked off this week also is the Cloud Native Nordics Cafe, which might be of interest. Yeah, Kasper is ready. Which basically is this one is recorded. Now we're gonna eventually post it to YouTube, hopefully if it works, and so on and so forth. More structured agenda and speakers, but in the Cloud Native Nordics Cafe, it's a casual Zoom call, no recording, no set agenda or anything. It's just like you drink coffee or whatever you prefer together with other Cloud Native friends and discuss what you feel for. So we're trying to that as the virtual coffee break for people that we now mostly at least working remotely. Cool. So well, let's start with some introductions then. So first we have Kasper, and Kasper is a CNCF ambassador. He's working at Lunar at the moment, doing stuff with COPS and other interesting things. They're kind of building a bank, as far as I understand, in a digital way. Yeah, and then we have Jessica working at Meltwater in their also CNCF ambassador, doing their platform team, as I understand it. So basically now that we have all of these Kubernetes stuff and like all this, to some extent, also new complexity, we need someone to take care of that so people can focus on their day-to-day jobs. And we have Hans from Unity, who's been, is it Copenhagen, right?
Yes,
yeah,
that's right.
Cool. We're organizing meetups in Copenhagen. And then we have Laszlo, which is, I think you have your own company, right? laszlo.cloud.
I am freelance contracting, yes, consulting.
Yes, exactly. Cool. That's great. So to get the discussion going, we first something I saw from a podcast the other day. So where they were talking about, it was engineering, and they were talking about favorite wavelengths and like favorite voltages and stuff. So let's start with favorite CNCF logos, and you can in turn talk a couple of sentences on what you think is the best logo of CNCF projects.
I can start. So I think Jaeger is definitely the coolest one. I love Go, and yeah, it's a gopher in there. So it's I just think it's a cool logo. Yeah, it's a cartoonish logo as well, which is also always awesome.
Damn it. My favorite logo is this very unique one that no one ever mentioned before. It's the Jaeger logo. Now, that's one of my favorites. I think there's like a variant of the Kubernetes logo going around as well that has like a cat hanging over the corner. I think that one is really good as well, even though I guess it's not an official logo.
Hans, you want to go?
I'm you, Laszlo. No, I didn't really expect this was the actual question. Now I'm gonna have to figure something out. But I don't know. There's several good logos. Jaeger is also a favorite of mine. I also kind of like the telepresence and or the ambassador. I want kind of to take some of the same logos, even though it's maybe not a CNCF project. I'm not actually sure. It's the one with the little penguin style animal.
I also did not expect the question, so I'm just looking at the CNCF landscape right now, and there are so many projects. And I also like the Go style logos a lot, but I just go with the safe option. I like the Kubernetes logo, and I like when it's upside down, which I really don't understand how it happens.
That's great. Cool. So
coming from the Nordics, we should probably have mentioned the OPA logo as well, right?
Well,
but it's actually on Hans's t-shirt.
Yeah, so we have we're representing it. Yeah. Cool. So just if you want to go like 2 minutes each or something, introduce yourself with your own words, no, which is probably a better description than mine. And then after that we'll kick things off. So Kasper, do you go first?
Sure. Yeah, so you already said it. My name is Kasper. I work as a site reliability engineer at a company called Lunar. And as Lucas also mentioned, we are right now building a bank, or transforming from being a fintech company to actually being a real bank. We got a banking license last year. Also, in my spare time, work as a CNCF ambassador and organize meetups in Aarhus primarily, but help out as much as possible within the Nordics community as well. Yeah, together with Lucas, we founded this Cloud Native Nordics thing, and we just basically trying to, gather all people in the Nordics like you guys and do some cool stuff and cool events. I try to go out as much as possible to speak at the different meetup groups and also conferences if possible, if my CFPs get accepted. I have a blog called kubecloud.io that I actually haven't written anything on for like 2 years or something, but I like to mention it because it's sort of how I got into Kubernetes, because it's about Raspberry Pis and Kubernetes clusters, and there's some guides to now setting up quite old Kubernetes clusters and Raspberry Pis, but you can find some interesting stuff in there. That's also some COP stuff as well. But yeah, that's how I got into Kubernetes and Cloud Native in the first place, was a master thesis about Raspberry Pis and Kubernetes and how you could use small Raspberry Pi clusters as learning objects for universities to teach about Cloud Native and microservices and Kubernetes and all these new cool things that we all love. I think that's it.
Yeah, and that's also from where we met initially. Cool. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm located in Gothenburg, Sweden. I'm also CNCF ambassador, mostly due to me organizing the Kubernetes Göteborg meetup. And we've been fairly good at being active lately, except this thing happened. So we are also trying to do more virtual ones, and I feel like it's very fun to go like combine all the Nordics together and do like virtual meetups together. I'm really looking forward to see what we can do in the next couple of months. Every day I work at Meltwater, or not every day, weekday. And as Lucas mentioned, I'm part of the platform team, or as we call it, the foundation mission. And what we do is that we build a platform and we try to solve the everyday problems that all teams will have, so that not every team has to find their own unique solutions. We provide logging as a service, container orchestration as a service, etc. And I'm going to tell you more about it later, but we're running a very large Kubernetes cluster. It's very fun working with. That's me.
Cool. Hans.
Yeah. Hello, I am Hans. I'm a co-organizer of the Cloud Native Copenhagen meetup group. I have been currently working with Unity, like the real-time game engine or 3D engine, and been there since November last year. Before that, I was with a very Nordic company called Visma. I work as a software engineer, so I actually am not necessarily that directly involved in the DevOps, but I've been doing that a lot and still have a passion for it. So I also kind of help out with involving our state of tech in Unity as a whole. But we work in the source control team, so we are providing tooling to work with a massive code base, because apparently 3D engines are approaching the size of operating systems when it comes to source code. So that's you need very good tooling to work efficiently with that. Yeah. Questions hit me later. But Laszlo.
Yeah, so I'm Laszlo. I'm doing freelance DevOps consulting since 2016, mostly helping like smaller or mid-sized companies, like 10 to 40 developers, to move to the cloud and create their tooling and processes, and just helping them along the way, workshops and such. But more of that during the presentation. I think you will see more.
Cool. So, any questions? Any questions so far?
You didn't introduce yourself, maybe?
Well, I could do that. Yeah, I'm Lucas Käldström, from Finland. Currently, I'm studying at Aalto, but well, as everybody else at home, my hometown. I've been well. I started my journey into these cloud native things by doing Raspberry Pi, porting Kubernetes to Raspberry Pi. Then kind of finding out that other people like Kasper were doing it, teamed up with them and gave that kind of content back to the Kubernetes community. And then I found that, well, open source is pretty fun, and stayed in maintaining Kubernetes stuff for 4 years, something like that. Have been a contractor, also freelancer, kind of mainly working for WeWorks on these Kubernetes, for example, Kubernetes upstream stuff. So, and yeah, then I figured that the meetups would be a good venue in Finland too, for these kinds of things. So started those, and well, now teamed up with a lot of other nice people across all of the Nordics, which is really exciting. Cool. So we don't have any questions so far. Then we'll proceed to the actual content, right? So the first, yeah, and from the chat, yeah, you saw my brother in in the screen. That's how it is being at home, right? Cool. So maybe we should let Kasper go first on how it is, well, building this bank, and then like how are you doing it?
Sure.
Thoughts on you know, COPS and all the other things.
Can
Yeah,
you see my screen?
Now we can. Yeah.
Now you can. All right. So Cloud Native at Lunar. I already mentioned this. This is who I am. This is just a slide that I read up from before when Lucas asked about introducing myself. So I already told this. But just one cool thing: the image of the Raspberry Pis, the Kubernetes clusters. I just love Raspberry Pis in Kubernetes. It's super awesome, and again, it was the way that I got into this this new world of Cloud Native. And
one perspective there, which might not be obvious, is that when you're actually on limited hardware, you have to like figure out a lot more than if you're running on beefy, I don't know, Google Cloud servers. So you actually have to understand the full system before doing it. So I definitely recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
To understand the whole thing.
And for us, the whole idea with these Raspberry Pi clusters was basically to hand these clusters out to groups of students in a class that we were teaching at this time, and they actually had an assignment to create microservices, to create 4 or 5 microservices doing some interaction, and actually load test those services and pull out the plug of a Raspberry Pi cluster or the network cable and see how everything was sort of being handled by Kubernetes, and talk a bit about resilience and all that. And this is also what we visualize on the Mac over here. It's a node failing and Kubernetes just rescheduling stuff and pods around on other machines. So it was a really, really nice way to teach students about this new paradigm. And it still is. It's still a really nice way to get into these new concepts and how it works. But that's not what I do for my entire workday. I work at a company called Lunar, and this is somewhat of what we are building. We are building a faster, better, and stronger bank. That's at least our goals, is to compete against the old, boring, established banks out there in the Nordics. So it's in Norway, it's in Sweden, it's in Denmark. We are live currently, and we will be live in Finland later this year. That's the plan. So this is what we are trying to do, and just create awesome user experiences instead of these old, boring apps and stuff like that. So just some facts before I dig into what we actually are doing. We have around 100 microservices currently running in our production environment. We have 3 Kubernetes clusters. We are on AWS. Use COPS as Lucas talked about. I can go into that later. And just some numbers of the current users using our platform right now. It's 150,000, and yeah, do a lot of transaction each month and stuff like that. So continuing. So why? The big question is always why do this? Why embark on this journey into Cloud Native? And for us, we set some goal up front. It was basically around we need to get some speed into our sort of feature development, and we need to be able to put stuff out there for our customers really, really fast. We also could see that this was potentially a thing that could scale quite fast, and we had goals around scaling in the Nordics, and actually in the beginning it was a global thing that so scalability was a big thing when we started. And of course resilience, you don't want to be in a store and your card is not working or something like that. We need to be able to have systems that can sort of heal themselves to some degree, and something like Kubernetes helps us a lot with that. So when I joined Lunar, and it was called Lunar way back then, we they had sort of started or embarked on the journey of doing microservices, and but they were sort of doing it in the wrong way. They were doing sort of a distributed monolith instead. That was a highly coupled data model, and deployment was way too exciting. It really required a lot of coordination. I actually built some kind of orchestration within Jenkins where you selected different versions. So, and then Ansible and Terraform was sort of spinning up VMs and deploying the different microservices on. Basically, we built an entire machine with a complete set of the environment and just replicated that. So that wasn't that sort of cloud native in that sense, even though we were on the cloud. It was still on AWS. It was still running Docker containers and all of this. But yeah, as I mentioned, we were sort of, at this time, they had 6 or 7 microservices when I joined, and you had to go into Jenkins, select each version of the different microservice that you wanted to come out. And then it took 45 minutes or so, and a new environment was sort of spun up from this configuration. And you can imagine when you now have 100 microservices, this thing wouldn't have scaled at all. Coordinating different versions across all of these different microservices would have been, yeah, very, very hard, and it would have taken even more coordination and to actually get this done. So back in 2017, when I joined the team, I got the chance to basically rip down the entire infrastructure and figure out what to do instead. And I introduced Kubernetes as a solution to actually obtain one of these goals of doing microservices, which is of course to have independent deployable services. And yeah, that's sort of one of the main goals that we chose Kubernetes, because it's a really good way to abstract that away, and also don't have to run everything on every sort of environment on one machine and then just replicate it. We can spread it across a fleet of machines, which also gives some resilience and all of that. So yeah, we embarked on that journey back in 2017. And we started, I didn't mention this before, but we started with a Rails monolith way back. It's sort of how probably you do this in the startup world. You start in Rails because it's easy and it works. It's easy to get going. And yeah, they, as I mentioned, at some point started to break this apart. And they actually introduced Node.js as the way that we were sort of not putting stuff in the monolith anymore. We were just building new node sources around the monolith. And that gave us some problems. We saw some really weird things with Node.js. I think 6 or 7 layers down of dependencies. There were a memory leak, and they were actually crashing our nodes often. So we had a lot of problem with Node, and that got us thinking: is this really the right tool to actually in the future build a bank on a language that's not statically typed? So we actually pivoted and selected Go as our primary language from then on. And we've been using Go now for 2.5 years or something like that. And it's been really, really great. It also aligns a lot with our infrastructure team that I'm part of, or platform team, because everything we sort of have in the platform team is, of course, written in Go, because everything in the cloud native world almost is written in Go. So it's a really good way to sort of share experiences across feature teams and the platform team. But yeah, as I mentioned, we ripped down the entire production system basically and rebuilt it with Kubernetes as the foundation layer. We had this vision back then that we read a lot about Amazon's philosophy: if you build it, you run it, and we wanted to decentralize everything. Our developers should everything should be decentralized and run repository, and all the developers should basically handle this themselves. And it turned out to be a headache, because when you then have security stuff coming in, and you need to have all of the different teams apply these things and maybe upgrade their Docker files and stuff like that, that was a big problem. So we actually centralized the configuration again using a tool we built ourselves, which is open source, called Shuttle. It's doing templating and stuff like that for your projects. You can check it out. I don't have that much time left. The next,
yeah, it's 1-2 minutes.
Yeah, the next thing on our journey was GitOps. So we embarked on a GitOps journey almost a year and a half ago, because we could see that we needed audit, we needed a good way to do disaster recovery, and we needed more security in our pipelines. And GitOps was for me a good way to actually obtain this. So this is just sort of wrapping everything up, as Kubernetes is the foundation that we sort of build on, and we use Git as sort of the source of truth for everything we do inside of our clusters. And we want to put more stuff within Git. We want to be able to, as you can see here, Kubernetes is an abstraction on top of AWS in this picture, and we want to be able to control AWS resources using Kubernetes, everything using Kubernetes basically. So this is what we are we want Kubernetes to be the foundation of everything we do, and we want the source of truth to be in Git so it can be reconciled into to our environments. And just fairly quickly in the end, this is kind of the project from the CNCF that we use right now. Kubernetes, as I mentioned, Envoy, we use it for some proxies and stuff. Prometheus, of course, for monitoring. We're not using FluentD, but we have been using FluentD. We're using FluentBit now because it was more lightweight. Flux as the GitOps operator. I think that's what they call it. CorDNS, of course, etcd, of course, because of Kubernetes, and gRPC for internal communications, and Jaeger for tracing. So that's, and thank you. Check these out if you want to know more about what we do.
Cool. Any other questions than the GitOps tool, which was Flux?
Sorry?
No, I'm just to the audience. Is there let's see.
There's a blog post that I published a couple of weeks ago on this blog about our GitOps journey and what we do and how we do it, if you're interested.
Okay, thank you.
One question about this Raspberry you had. How many working clients do you have for that one for each cluster we saw in this picture? They're using KPS, I understand.
So yeah, the picture is just showing many small clusters with 4 Raspberry Pis in each of them. We created it in that way so you could actually combine all the Raspberry Pi clusters to one cluster. So that's what you see there. So you can either run them as independent clusters or you can run them as one big cluster.
So you're using four Raspberry Pi for each cluster, I understand. So actually you will have many master and 2 masters and 2 clients, I understood.
Oh, masters. Okay. We only run the top one was a master and 3 worker nodes. That was the setup.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's my question. Thanks.
Cool. Jessica, thank you, Kasper.
Sure. Let me share my screen. Okay. I think you should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
Perfect. So these are the projects we use. There might be some others as well. I mean, we obviously use etcd as well in our Kubernetes cluster, etc. But we used Prometheus, but we started using it a long time ago. So long ago that I think we used it before I even joined Meltwater as a company. And recently we started using Thanos in combination with our Prometheus to have gapless metrics at all times. So we don't get paged when we do a rolling restart of our Prometheus instances, etc. It's still just a sandbox project, but it is very nice. Actually, we like it a lot. And we use Kubernetes for our container orchestration. As I mentioned before, we have been running it in production for 2 years. When I say running in production, I mean with production load. And we are running it in AWS. We self-host it and we manage it using Kops, which is a sub-project of Kubernetes. And we have been looking at Jaeger for the distributed tracing, but unfortunately not something that we have been able to take to production yet. So what I want to show you most is like a screenshot of our cluster. This was taken from our Grafana dashboard yesterday, and we are running a single setup cluster, which means that we have dev, staging, and prod load in the same cluster. We only have one cluster, except for the small dev clusters for us when we try out new features, of course. So we have like just shy of 400 nodes. My teammates were really disappointed that I couldn't get a screenshot with 400 nodes because numbers are fun. In general, we have 115 namespaces. It's not exactly one dev, staging, and prod account per team, but I would say that we most likely have somewhere around 25 and 30 teams onboarded to the cluster currently. And as you can see, we have like 1,000 deployments and almost 6,000 pods. What I should say about the number of pods is that we are running 7 daemon sets, which means that 7 times 393, it's quite a lot. So about half of the pods that are running in our cluster are something that we use for managing Kubernetes and all the things that we need, log harvesting, etc., metrics from node export here, etc. So the customer load is somewhere around 2,900 pods, and those are spread over dev, staging, and prod. Running one single cluster in this kind of setup and to not have any downtime for our users means that we have to take a lot of caution whenever we do an upgrade. We have done extensive work on making sure that we can do a rolling upgrade without having our customers notice at all. And we also have done some load testing to make sure that we know that we can continue scaling up, because we're starting to reach a point where we get like pain points just based on the size of the cluster that we have. As a teaser, I know that 2 of my teammates have a talk about how we do load testing when we try like load testing and see how large we can scale our cluster, and they have a lot of cool numbers that they are willing to share in a session coming soon. Well, mainly these are the things that I wanted to share. I think that if there's any questions, I can take those.
Jaeger storage backends, what do you prefer?
I think when we were trying it out, we were running it towards Elasticsearch as a storage backend. I mean, what our initial test shows is that it's a lot of metrics, and it costs a lot to store it. And I do know that a lot of other people we talk to seem to be using, oh, I forgot the name, but some kind of third-party company that they send all the metrics to, and that they then do some sampling and decide to store part of it. Because in distributed tracing, the storage and the maintaining of that is the hard part.
Yeah. Background jobs co-hosted with end user facing stuff. Or...
Yeah. So it was me. So super impressive numbers. I'm just curious about the one cluster setup, whether you use various node pools for different workloads.
Yes, to some extent. I can talk a little bit more about that. In case, I'm not sure if this is large enough for you to see, but underneath the number of nodes, we have different instance types. So these are the different instance groups that we have. For instance, we have a specific one for Prometheus. So Prometheus is on their own instance based on having like a very specific type of load. We also do host the nodes for our logging backend on this one, and the logging for us can be very bursty. If someone is doing load testing of our users, they send a lot of more logs. So we want to be able to scale up and scale down quite aggressively. So to not have impact on other people, we put all the logging processing in its own instance group, which means that only the logging nodes are running in that instance group. And we have also like a general one, which is memory heavy, because we have a lot of Java applications. And we have a compute specific one for the ones that need more compute resources. But it's not separated by customer facing versus workload. It's separated more about what kind of workload it is.
Thank you.
Did you have another question, Laszlo?
No, just in general about request limits and their resource limits and requests. Like, do you over provision your cluster in some ways, or because I tend to be super cautious about these, and I don't know how it works for you.
So we don't enforce our users to have these, but we have been thinking about looking at OPA and be able to kind of like enforce it on deployments to always have the resources defined. Part of it is because otherwise you don't know that your resource will run. You might get like thrown out if you get too little memory or whatever it might be. So for stable workload, in our best practices, we have defined this is something that you should define. And then we also encourage our users to like check the metrics. How much do you request? How much do you use? But still no enforcement. But we have been looking in different ways. There are different tools out there for getting exports and stuff. And we're thinking about different ways we can push this type of information to the teams. Like for this kind of deployment, you're requesting this much and using that much. That means that you are wasting this much money with your requests. It's not in place yet, but it's something that we're really looking forward to look into.
Cool. I think, yeah, so one question more before proceeding to Hans. What is your thoughts on one big cluster or many small clusters? So, or literally, as I said in chat, have you taken or considered any specific security measures to isolate workloads of different types in such a big cluster?
So there are different things you can do to isolate. Currently, we have isolated on namespaces, and we only have access, like write access, to the team that owns that namespace. Each team has their own namespace, or they might request a namespace-specific service. But we also have, we are looking into service mesh as everyone else, but it's not stable enough to roll out in the GA yet. So, but the idea with rolling that out is to be able to apply network policies between applications and namespaces to make it more secure. But I know it's not the best security, but it's not worse than it were where we came from. It's still better than we were where we came from. So even if it can get better, we're not worse off than we were before.
Okay, cool. So we have, I've noted down, we have kind of 2 questions more, but we'll let
Let's
yeah,
in
between.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where do I stop sharing? Sorry.
Let me just share my screen then. Okay. So I'm not going to talk so much about the stuff that we do. I'm going to talk about the experience of going from Visma to Unity. One thing I didn't mention when I did the intro is that I also volunteer building a very large computer network for a gaming event with like 5,000 people. That's the virtual background I have on. That's image from that event, if you're wondering. So experiences and cloud, how I view cloud native and why I'm into cloud native. I would like to start by examining a typical cloud journey. I think many people, they get into the cloud with some amount of forklifting or lift and shift strategies, etc. That is certainly was the case for us as well, actually both companies. So if you look at a cloud journey, you probably started out that way, and then once you have migrated or you become hosted in the cloud, then maybe you start optimizing for the cloud. So maybe you start consuming some of the cloud vendored services. Could be RDS, it could be something more elaborate, some of these NoSQL services or whatnot. And then I think the next level from that is the cloud native level. And I have been met with confusion about what is cloud native. Maybe they hear it as a buzzword or a term that someone uses, and then they would formulate their own opinion on what is cloud native, even though there is a cloud native definition, which I won't go into due to time. But it was just an interesting story because I actually was in an internal presentation in this band, and we had a software architect that stated that if you are making a SaaS product and it's delivered over the internet and it's hosted on the cloud, then it was cloud native. And that was I can see what he kind of came from, like it's in the cloud, or it's been in the cloud always, so it must be a cloud native, right? But the thing about is what we think of as cloud native is very much different from that definition, or thinking at least. So I think cloud native is a evolutionary term that, and it's a progress that has been ongoing for quite some time, starting up with virtualization and then PaaS, and now we're into containers as a service and or serverless, and it's a evolutionary term. We all know this, or I suspect many of you know this chasm and this way of grouping things together. How many of you actually know the origin of that categorization or that drawing? So the book is called Crossing the Chasm. It's from 98, and the typical example is the electric car. So back in 98, there were some enthusiasts that were retrofitting cars with batteries and trying to get rid of that not very environmentally friendly gasoline, etc. Then the book has been revised a few times, and it's kind of interesting because there was another revision in '99, and back then General Motors were just now launching an electric car, but I imagine that if you were thinking back to '99, you probably did not see a lot of electric cars out on the streets. Then actually the book was revised again, this time in 2013, and that's right when Tesla launched. So you can really think about these different eras of the revisions of the book as also part of this separate grouping of the innovators and the early adapters, and then the early majority where you see Tesla coming out, and then there's a progress going around where you have the proliferation of electric cars, but still there's many people clinging on to their fuel guzzling vehicles. And it's a really interesting trend in technology that there's this chasm to cross. So why is it worth crossing? What are some of the benefits that I see going cloud native? So it's around isolation. That's actually a lot of that is just comes from containers, but being able to package up your applications and then having the same code running in production as it was running in development, and then reuse, of course. It's also a matter of you can, with a lot of the cloud native stack, you can become cloud agnostic and you can avoid login. So login in terms of any of these public clouds or private clouds. So for instance, if you started on this journey and you optimize for the cloud, maybe you optimize for a specific cloud, maybe you optimize for a specific service that AWS provides. And I think one of the big values in using the cloud native stack or the tools in the cloud native toolchain is that you avoid this login. So you can eventually change cloud providers, and that happens all the time in big enterprises as well. We also had another architect that said that you should not be afraid of the sticky cloud, because if you didn't consume the sticky cloud or the sticky services, then you were missing out on the value of the public cloud. I think cloud native is exactly the solution to that answer, that you can actually gain all of the capabilities of cloud services and cloud providers without succumbing to sticky cloud situations. Of course, scaling is really important for many businesses, both growing and large companies as well. I also put out this little trend that there's a tremendous growth in the number of containers that you're running, and you have 48% of businesses that are now running more than 100 containers. And when you run that many containers, you definitely need a solid orchestration engine like Kubernetes. You also want to have certain autonomy in the system. For instance, self-healing, etc., is very much a big value of going cloud native. Of course, having a solid, having something like Kubernetes in place and resource limits and requests, etc., you can really optimize your use of resources. Maybe Meltwater is a good example. And then when it comes with resiliency, you have to be prepared for everything can fail, including public clouds. And it's really important that when you go from a on-prem environment where you kind of control many of the factors to giving everything to another vendor, then you should also build your applications to be resilient. Lucas, you are welcome to interrupt me if there's anything interesting happening in the chat. I won't be able to read it. So that was my take on Cloud Native in a very short while. So how was it to actually try to introduce Cloud Native and to follow the Cloud Native mindset in a big company like Visma? So Visma, they make financial software. So they make software for accountants and auditors. And if there's one thing that auditors really like, or maybe they like more than that, but what I see they like is they really like compliance and they really like ISO and other certifications. So it's a key business metric for Visma to have a really solid compliance. And for that purpose, they enforce their own compliance frameworks, which is compatible with the standards.
So you have approximately 2 minutes left.
Okay. I don't have, I think I have 2 slides left, so I'll hurry up then. But they come with really nasty words, such as and acronyms. The well-architected assessment for public cloud. That doesn't sound very cloud native at all. And I can tell you that trying to introduce cloud native in a company like that was lots and lots of hours of spinning out assessments on Confluence. And you had to actually do it for every microservice you add, which is becomes very hard and cumbersome. So how is it different? Well, we're now going from finance to gaming, or at least 3D engine territory. And Unity is a very, very different company in many regards. I won't be able to cover them here, but one of the core values is they have a value called best ideas win. And with best ideas win, you kind of think of there's lots of alignment going on, but actually there's been lots of autonomy. So the teams are doing it in many, many different ways. And we have everything running from C++ to Go, Rust, Mercurial, and Git. And we even have people building hardware to do really special things with in data centers, and we have public clouds. So now there's no longer this compliance process to drive alignment. There's no longer a compliance or decision-making process to ensure that we use the same tools. Instead, that has been replaced by evangelism and knowledge sharing. So you have to be much more outgoing. You have to share knowledge and to find people who care about others as well, and that care to find some common ground. I'm going to skip this because of time. So any questions?
Cool, thanks. Let's see. If you have questions, please write them in the chat.
I think that there was a general question to everyone about like how to transition to cloud native and like going 100%. You have to integrate everything right away, or can you do it in small increments? So Hans, would you say anything about that?
Yeah. So there's this this road to the cloud native trail map, as you probably have seen it, and I actually did try to evangelize that a little bit. So you can get started with containers and move up into further territory later on. So you wouldn't get started with a service mesh right away. You would just get started with containers and Kubernetes to begin with, and then maybe CI/CD. You could also, before you actually move into like service meshes and all the fancy tech, you might be able to start with thinking about how your services communicate. Could you maybe introduce something like gRPC or something other efficient messaging format?
Yeah, and as I also wrote in the chat, it's kind of piece by piece, and it doesn't make sense to like adopt all of it just because, like, I don't know, you saw a fancy KubeCon keynote around it. It really is like an assessment of what makes sense for your business. That in some cases, for example, you probably start feeling the pain of not doing it, and then when you have that kind of, you start feeling the pain, then it might make sense to actually start doing, for example, I don't know, loads of deep down tracing or stuff like that between your microservices. It's not the first thing you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just like to point out that the compliance hell was from Visma and not from Unity. I saw a comment in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
So,
Just a small comment. Also remember in the journey that Kubernetes is not the end goal. Once you have Kubernetes, you're not there. There's so much other stuff that you need to comprehend, new ways of working, organizing your company. There's a lot of things that you need to embrace and throw yourself into in order to do this.
Yeah.
It's not just Kubernetes and then you're done.
And I also mentioned that I don't think be sure that you need Kubernetes before you think that's where you're going. I mean, if you have one monolith, you don't need Kubernetes.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. I don't use Kubernetes for my WordPress blog stuff.
We do use it for our static website in Cloud Native Nordics.
Yeah, well, anyways, to build on what Kasper said, with like Kubernetes is not the end goal. The end goal is more towards, for example, what Jessica was presenting. That like they have validated what makes sense for us and what makes sense for us to use which projects. And it wasn't all of the CNCF projects. It was some which had business value, and then you build a platform that. Cool. But Laszlo, next.
All right, I found the unmute button. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Hans, by the way.
Yes, it was awesome. Your last slide, I want to talk about that later. All right, so this is what I'm going to talk about. What do I do? What does a consultant do in the cloud native world? Common technologies, common tasks I do, what kind of environment I'm working in, and the parts I love about cloud native, and I'm also having some thoughts about what could be improved in cloud native, and just finishing up with things I think are super interesting these days. So this you know already. I think maybe the kinds of clients I work with is interesting. So it's mostly software as a service companies. They typically have like 10 to 40 developers, like 5 product teams working on various product streams. And yeah, those projects are quite long actually, like 6 to 18 months long. When I started up this freelancing world, I thought I have to have a huge pipeline of clients coming in, and I'm done with, I just install things, and in 3 weeks I'm done, and I move to the next one. Turns out it's people like to get introduced to this cloud native tech piece by piece and getting confident, and also there is a lot of knowledge transfer and learning going on along the way. My inspiration is very similar to Kasper's, because back in 2014-15 we also were splitting up a monolith, and but our automation was just lagging behind, and at some point it was super unmanageable and very painful. And we were also doing Jenkins and Ansible to spin up VMs, and also specifying like which version of which microservice should run. And it was a huge tooling, but it was a bit fragile. And I'm certainly think that cloud native and Kubernetes and containers makes us better off in terms of like developer productivity. All right, the common technologies. I only use managed Kubernetes simply because that's a lot easier. I was blessed with Google Cloud in 2 separate projects, so I loved that very much, but also worked with Azure Kubernetes service as well. And I don't have the logo map, but just a few notes. What I usually do is that like ingress controllers, I always use something from the cloud native stack. So I don't really use the cloud offered ingress controller for reasons like
it costs a lot more, right?
Exactly. So every time I offer a service, you have to get a distinct load balancer, or at least that was the case when I last checked. So I just like my Nginx ingress controller a lot better. And also I could define million small ingress YAML pieces throughout my configuration and not one giant ingress. Logging, I've done like an ELK stack, like Elasticsearch, Kibana, but also like the default stack driver for Google Cloud is quite nice, and sometimes I just use that. Metrics, Prometheus is the go-to thing. However, it's brilliant for us, brilliant for cloud native or DevOps engineers who want to gather a lot of data and be able to deep dive in various node level metrics or Kubernetes metrics. But I had a hard time selling it to application developers. So that's always a learning curve while they start to appreciate it. Promql, for example, wasn't an easy way or easy path for them to learn. And again, price concerns, I think these SaaS offerings are a little bit on the pricey side, but I also see that Prometheus is quite a thing to set up and maintain over time. There are a bunch of very nice small projects like kubens or kubectx to change your work context. I love those. I always install like kube state metrics to be able to sniff out even more data with Prometheus. Also, I was doing my homegrown templating for a long while. I think early days I didn't much like Helm because of the tiller component, so I just started to do a very basic set based replacement stuff, and that like a homegrown tooling grew out of that. I use Customize lately, it's growing on me, and also I'm going to revisit Helm as well. Cert Manager, I just love that project. I don't do service mesh, or at least I only had just a few pilot projects some time ago, so it's better by now, but back then it was a little bit painful. And also the clients I'm working with don't have a huge web of microservices, so it's not like a 10 level deep call stack that is happening, but more like a client request hits one service, and maybe that fans out to just one or two more services. So there wasn't an immediate need to have the tracing in place and the other things that service mesh give you. Also, just a side note, I was surprised that maybe if I use service mesh these days, I still have to propagate headers through my service stack. Maybe you guys can confirm that or not, but that was something I recently saw. And again, using cloud providers, managed databases made my job a lot easier because I was not doing a lot of state management inside Kubernetes. And meanwhile, I say that I consult or I work with Kubernetes, Docker, and cloud things. It's mostly glue code. It's mostly CI. It's mostly putting the company's culture into the automation or into the internal tooling of that company. Of course, there is a lot of cloud-related provisioning with Terraform, like the networks, firewall rules, and so on. But many of the things come down into application configuration management and a lot of getting developers on board to this new platform, like because they know some Docker. I think everybody knows some Docker these days. Some even maintain their Docker Compose file for local development, and that's pretty cool if they do. But how to move that to production, it's always not. It's often not obvious for them, and also that they have to get too familiar with the new Kubernetes YAML format, which is different than their Compose. There are good analogies there, but still, it's a different animal. And like
so sorry,
yep.
sorry to interrupt. With regards to timing, we are kind of out of time now, but
okay.
so if people want to still continue watching, feel free to. I'm gonna let it go over by 10 minutes. It's like 10 minutes. Everybody has had 10 minutes each, but then some common questions and extra time will add 10 minutes more for the recording. If you have another meeting that you need to drop, feel free to. But again, Laszlo can continue maybe 5 minutes more, and then we'll take the final questions and then next steps. Cool.
Yeah, so I'm going to be very quick from here on. So it's not everybody cares about this stuff so deeply that we do, and that was a painful revelation. And some are even annoyed with us that why are we doing our fancy things? It's not going to work anyways. But sometimes you find those people who really care, and it's very nice collaborating with those guys. And sometimes the best contribution comes from parts of the organization you wouldn't expect. So that's cool. So I like Cloud Native. There are many great projects. I like the everything is code approach. I like that you can build everything and you can really do your internal tooling just how your culture is or how your processes are. But the bad part is also comes from this fact. Oftentimes the batteries are not included. Like Prometheus is one of my pain points because I just love using it. I'm very productive with it, but for developers to get on board with PromQL, use various tools, Alert Manager, Grafana for various things, it's just a little bit of a fragmented experience that it's sometimes difficult to sell to developers who may want to use Datadog or something else. And maybe Grafana is fixing it these days. They try to be this one-stop shop in Prometheus land. And also CI, it's very custom. And by the third or fourth time I'm writing this for different companies, it's just growing on me that maybe there's a better way. So these are the things I care about these days. And GitOps, I really find it super interesting, partly because it may help in the tooling part, or at least remove some functionality from CI. And this is the place where I spend my free brain cycles these days. And I'm happy to chat about this. Maybe not in this meeting, not in this panel. So that's that. And yeah, any questions?
GitOps is for the cafe then, right?
I think so, yeah. It's a super opinionated topic and everybody has a take. It's great.
Let's discuss that on Friday then.
Let's do that.
Yep. How about questions to Laszlo? Let's see. So Grafana Explorer features are very nice for users. Has anybody looked at the Grafana operator? I'm currently using it and loving it. Anyone have experience with it? Or you?
I love the Explore feature, and I think that Grafana is doing a lot of the job that is missing from Prometheus. And so it's cool. I haven't used the operator, but we have the cafe next on Friday, and I think many more people will join. And maybe some.
Yeah, I can pitch in. I've used the Prometheus operator a bit, just as we use it on a Cloud Native Nordics Kubernetes repository for our static site because I have a complete monitoring system in place there, which makes total sense. But anyway, we at Lunar has been also facing this issue of having developers to actually care about and adding stuff into their Grafana dashboards. We have tried to centralize Grafana dashboards and sort of create dashboards for them without that much success. Now we build a small sidecar that runs besides Grafana that actually just loads in JSON files, so they can actually store their dashboards on their own repositories, and that makes it easier for them to have the same dashboards through different environments because it's templated. So they can just replace whatever URL or whatever they have in their labels, and it makes it fairly easy for them to do that. But it's still an annoying sort of way to edit the dashboards because you have to edit them within Grafana and then export it and sort of do the changes in there. And we are looking for different tooling in this area as well. We haven't found the golden solution, but this helps a bit, at least in terms of doing it between the different environments.
Cool. Yeah, and
and one thing more, we can have them in Git, which is a thing that we like as well. And
yeah, exactly. So just to give some background on what Kasper was talking about, the static site. So you might not know, but the cloudnativenordics.com site is run on DigitalOcean managed Kubernetes, and it's literally a static site written in Vue. And then we have one boilerplate component which kind of fetches data from GitHub, and fetches data from GitHub and merges with meetup API information, and then that gives a GraphQL for all the data to the website. And obviously, we could host this on a single node VM, anywhere, just with a one Nginx server, and that's it. But we went, Kasper especially went like all crazy and did like full Kubernetes thing and GitOps and Prometheus and all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in, and we did it because like we'd have some kind of reference solution of how you could do it. Obviously, we recommend that you have something else than a static site for actual production use, but it's kind of fun. And yeah, it would be nice to check more. Yeah, cool. You pasted in there. Can you also put the link to GitHub where we have that with the code is?
If we're sharing all the links, I want to share the link to the Google form where we are asking you if anyone else would like to join.
Yes,
Nice.
I had it in the queue.
So if anyone else has like an idea, want to share the Cloud Native story, how you got started using it, what tools, projects you're currently using, your experiences with it, etc. Just please fill out the form, and hopefully we can do another session like this one, like in a week or two.
Yeah, exactly. We're not sure, like, do we do this weekly or bi-weekly or something like that, but kind of like a meetup replacement that doesn't take too much time of all the everybody, and but still can be Nordics wide, somewhat casual. You can have slides. You don't have to have slides if you come speak, but it's really would be a nice way, so we also can get different perspectives from different parts of the Nordics, and also obviously abroad if people are in the time zone that they are willing to make this time. So any questions about the general setup or anything to add?
Just a quick addition. There's a Google group where we hopefully will post these events, so you can follow that group and you will then get the invites on the calendar. Hopefully, we are still sort of
yeah, I will look into if I can make the specific events public, and maybe you can just subscribe to the calendar without being part of the Google group. And we can, in that case, we can share that calendar in a tweet and in Slack, etc. And hopefully it will reach you, and you can subscribe to that calendar and just see whenever these cafes and meetups are happening.
Yes, I'm just looking for the link.
I will look into making the calendar public, and so we can publish events right after this one. But if you want access right now, join the Google group.
Yes, which is now linked. Yeah.
Do you know if the chat messages will be part of the recording?
I have no idea.
Kasper. There should be an option somewhere.
I'll see if I can export it, or
if you're looking at this recording later on and you can't access the links, then feel free to reach out on us to us on Twitter or in Slack, and we will gladly link it to you again.
Yeah.
Yes, and we'll again, this is the first. We'll revisit the format, maybe go webinars, maybe try out YouTube again if it starts working for these kinds of things. And again, the time is now we went 10 minutes over, but it's very hard to estimate. We'll figure that out more exactly as we go. Any other things to add or feedback or questions? Format.
I actually think it's nice to be able to do it on Zoom. It's more instant feedback, and people can actually also speak if they want to. Obviously, the limit of participants is the only issue as I see it.
Yep.
Yeah, I got some approval from the CNCF to for some funding, so I'll see if I can bump that funding a little bit more and get some more features.
Okay, cool. Well, that's that. It's 20 minutes before 3. Hopefully you have a productive afternoon, and also, at least in Finland, we have some sun. Maybe
Gothenburg as well for once.
too. Yeah. Cool. Thank you for attending, and see you next time.
Thank you all.
And thank you for moderating, Lucas.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.